Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Few discoveries in the history of modern medicine have evolved as dramatically as the glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1, receptor agonists. You might know them as the blockbuster weight loss drugs making headlines around the world, but their story actually begins in the 1990s. Scientists originally isolated this peptide from the venom of the Gila monster, a lizard known for its incredibly slow metabolism and unique digestive hormones. Initially developed to manage blood glucose levels in type 2 diabetes, these molecules have entirely transcended their original clinical boundaries. Today, they are globally recognized for their unprecedented efficacy in treating obesity, inducing weight loss that was previously thought possible only through invasive bariatric surgery. However, beneath the massive headlines of dramatic metabolic transformation lies a far more profound biological narrative. A robust and rapidly expanding body of clinical and molecular evidence reveals that GLP-1 receptor agonists possess potent, systemic, anti-inflammatory properties. Chronic, low-grade inflammation is the insidious common denominator underlying a vast spectrum of age-related and metabolic diseases. We are talking about conditions like atherosclerosis, neurodegeneration, chronic kidney disease, and metabolic dysfunction-associated steatohepatitis, commonly known as MASH. By acting on specific receptors distributed widely throughout the human body, far beyond the pancreas and the gut, these drugs are fundamentally rewriting the rulebook on how we treat chronic inflammatory states. Let us delve deep into the biological mechanisms of GLP-1 receptor agonists and their revolutionary anti-inflammatory applications across multiple organ systems. To understand the sheer magnitude of GLP-1's clinical potential, we first need to look at its endogenous origins. GLP-1 is an incretin hormone. Naturally, it is secreted primarily by the enteroendocrine L cells located in the distal ileum and colon in response to nutrient ingestion. Interestingly, it is also synthesized by a distinct population of neurons in the nucleus of the solitary tract within the brainstem. This brings us to the incretin effect. The incretin effect refers to the physiological phenomenon where oral glucose elicits a substantially greater insulin response than an equivalent dose of intravenous glucose. Essentially, your gut senses the food and sends an early warning signal to your pancreas. GLP-1, alongside another hormone called glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, or GIP, is the primary driver of this effect. In healthy individuals, GLP-1 binds to the GLP-1 receptor, which is a G-protein-coupled receptor, on the pancreatic beta cells. This stimulates glucose-dependent insulin secretion, while simultaneously suppressing the release of glucagon from the alpha cells. But there is a major biological catch. Natural human GLP-1 has a fleeting existence. An enzyme called dipeptidyl PEE4, or DPP4, acts as a rapid cleanup crew, quickly degrading the hormone. Because of this enzyme, natural GLP-1 has a biological half-life of less than 2 minutes. The pharmacological breakthrough came with the development of synthetic GLP-1 receptor agonists, such as exenatide, liraglutide, dulaglutide, and the highly potent semaglutide. Scientists made structural modifications to these synthetic versions. For example, they added fatty acid side chains that bind to albumin in the blood. This brilliant modification acts like a stealth shield, helping the drugs evade enzymatic degradation. It extended their half-life from mere minutes to days, or even a full week, allowing for continuous, sustained receptor activation. Crucially, the GLP-1 receptor is not confined to the pancreas. It is widely expressed in the central and peripheral nervous systems, the cardiovascular system including endothelial cells and cardiomyocytes, the gastrointestinal tract, the kidneys, the lungs, and heavily within the immune system, particularly on macrophages, microglia, and circulating lymphocytes. It is exactly this ubiquitous distribution that unlocks the drug class pleiotropic or multi-effect and anti-inflammatory capabilities. A central debate in the scientific community has been whether the reduction in systemic inflammation observed in patients taking these drugs is simply a secondary byproduct of profound weight loss and improved glycemic control. Adipose, or fat, tissue, particularly visceral fat, is highly metabolically active. It acts as an endocrine organ, constantly pumping out pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Naturally, shrinking this fat mass reduces the systemic inflammatory burden. However, modern research unequivocally demonstrates that GLP-1 receptor agonists exert direct anti-inflammatory effects that occur independently of and prior to significant weight loss. These direct effects are mediated through complex intracellular signaling pathways triggered the exact moment the GLP-1 molecule binds to its receptor on an immune or endothelial cell. Let us look closer at the molecular level. GLP-1 receptor activation potently inhibits nuclear factor kappa B, or NF-kappa B. This protein complex is universally considered the master switch of the inflammatory response. When GLP-1 binds to its receptor, it stimulates the production of cyclic AMP, which subsequently activates protein kinase A. This biochemical cascade phosphorylates and inhibits the I-kappa B kinase complex, thereby trapping the master switch NF-kappa B in the cytoplasm and preventing it from entering the nucleus to transcribe inflammatory genes. Furthermore, these therapies suppress the activation of the NLRP3 inflammasome. This is a multi-protein intracellular complex responsible for the maturation and release of highly potent pro-inflammatory cytokines, specifically interleukin-1 beta and IL-18. By downregulating NLRP3 activity, GLP-1 therapies effectively cool down the aggressive innate immune responses that drive tissue damage in chronic disease. This directly impacts macrophages, which are the frontline soldiers of the innate immune system. Macrophages exist on a spectrum, generally categorized into the aggressive, pro-inflammatory M1 phenotype and the tissue-repairing, anti-inflammatory M2 phenotype. In chronic metabolic diseases, macrophages infiltrating tissues like the liver or arterial walls are heavily skewed toward the destructive M1 state. GLP-1 signaling directly promotes the repolarization of macrophages from the M1 to the M2 phenotype. This repolarization dampens local tissue inflammation and promotes active healing and cellular repair. There is also a profound reduction in oxidative stress. Chronic inflammation and oxidative stress are inextricably linked, operating in a toxic feedback loop that destroys cellular machinery. GLP-1 receptor agonists have been shown to enhance mitochondrial function and upregulate the expression of endogenous antioxidant enzymes, thereby neutralizing reactive oxygen species. This restoration of cellular quality control protects delicate tissues, particularly the vascular endothelium and neuronal networks, from severe oxidative degradation. Let us pivot to the cardiovascular applications, because these drugs are literally healing the heart and blood vessels from the inside out. Historically, diabetes medications were evaluated merely on their ability to lower blood sugar without causing direct harm to the heart. This paradigm was permanently shattered by the cardiovascular outcome trials for GLP-1 therapies. In recent years, the cardiovascular community witnessed what is arguably the most significant breakthrough in preventative cardiology since the advent of statins. The landmark SELECT trial enrolled over 17,500 patients who had pre-existing cardiovascular disease and were overweight or obese, but crucially did not have diabetes. Patients receiving a 2.4 milligram weekly subcutaneous dose of semaglutide experienced a staggering 20% reduction in major adverse cardiovascular events, which is a composite of cardiovascular death, non-fatal heart attacks, and non-fatal strokes. What stunned researchers was the timeline and the underlying mechanism. The separation in cardiovascular event curves between the placebo and semaglutide groups occurred early in the trial, long before the patients had achieved maximum weight loss. Detailed analysis revealed profound drops in C-reactive protein, or CRP, a primary biomarker of systemic inflammation. Meta-analyses of trials have consistently demonstrated that treatment is associated with significant, duration-dependent reductions in high-sensitivity CRP concentrations. This strongly indicates that GLP-1 therapies stabilize vulnerable atherosclerotic plaques through direct anti-inflammatory and endothelial protective mechanisms. They are functioning as true disease-modifying therapies rather than mere weight loss aids. This cardiovascular protection happens right at the endothelium, the single layer of cells lining our blood vessels, which is the exact battleground where cardiovascular disease begins. A hallmark of early atherosclerosis is the expression of cellular adhesion molecules on the endothelial surface, such as ICAM1, VCAM1, and E-selectin. These molecules act like microscopic Velcro, catching circulating immune cells called monocytes and pulling them into the arterial wall, where they become foam cells and form dangerous atherosclerotic plaques. GLP-1 therapies exert profound protective effects right here. By inhibiting the nitrogen monofluoride kappa B pathway, they directly suppress the expression of these Velcro-like adhesion molecules. Furthermore, they improve the bioavailability of nitric oxide, a potent vasodilator, and reduce oxidative stress within the vessel wall, halting the progression of atherosclerosis at its very inception. This extends to heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, an increasingly common and notoriously difficult to treat condition, driven heavily by systemic and epicardial inflammation. This inflammation causes the heart muscle to become stiff and rigid, preventing it from relaxing and filling properly with blood. Recent landmark trials, such as STEP-HFpEF, have demonstrated that these therapies significantly improve symptoms, physical limitations, and exercise function in these patients, marking an emerging and highly transformative indication for this drug class. Moving from the heart to the brain, perhaps the most exciting and intellectually captivating frontier for GLP-1 therapies is the realm of neurology. The brain is historically protected by the blood-brain barrier, a strict security system, but systemic inflammation can compromise this barrier, allowing toxic inflammatory signals to trigger neurodegeneration. Furthermore, the brain can develop its own localized insulin resistance, a metabolic crisis so strongly linked to cognitive decline that Alzheimer's disease is frequently referred to in scientific literature as type 3 diabetes. GLP-1 receptor agonists, particularly lipid-soluble agents like semaglutide and liraglutide, can cross the blood-brain barrier and interact directly with receptors located on neurons, astrocytes, and microglia. Alzheimer's disease is characterized by the accumulation of toxic amyloid beta plaques and tau tangles, but these misfolded proteins are only part of the story. The true driver of neuronal death is the aggressive neuroinflammatory response they provoke, coupled with a severe decline in the brain's ability to utilize glucose for energy. Preclinical models have shown that GLP-1 therapies alleviate hippocampal inflammation, induce homeostasis in microglia, the brain's resident immune cells, and limit the infiltration of inflammatory peripheral neutrophils. Early clinical evidence in humans strongly supports this biological rationale. In a 26-week randomized trial, patients treated with liraglutide showed preserved cerebral glucose metabolism as measured by specialized brain scans, compared to a steep decline in the placebo group. These neuroprotective signals have paved the way for the massive Phase 3 EVOKE and EVOKE Plus clinical trial programs, which are currently investigating whether semaglutide can definitively slow the clinical cognitive decline in patients with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Similar breakthroughs are happening in Parkinson's disease, which is driven by the progressive death of dopamine-producing neurons in the substantia nigra, deeply exacerbated by chronic neuroinflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction. Animal models of Parkinson's have repeatedly demonstrated that GLP-1 therapies can rescue dying dopaminergic neurons, prolong cell survival by inhibiting the inflammatory master switch, and activate vital cellular survival pathways. Translating these findings to humans has yielded complex but highly promising results. The recent Phase 2 LIXIPARK trial in France showed that patients with early Parkinson's disease treated with lixisenatide experienced a preservation of motor function at 12 months, whereas those on the placebo continued to deteriorate. While larger, longer-term trials are necessary to conclusively prove disease modification, the neurotrophic and anti-inflammatory mechanisms of these drugs represent one of the most viable hopes for halting Parkinsonian neurodegeneration. Now let us look at the liver's renaissance. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, recently renamed metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease, affects roughly 1 in 4 individuals globally. In a significant subset of these patients, the disease progresses to MASH, a severe, highly inflammatory condition characterized by ballooning liver cells, relentless tissue inflammation, and progressive fibrotic scarring that can lead to cirrhosis and total liver failure. Historically, the quest for a pharmacological cure for MASH has been known as a graveyard for drug developers, with countless promising agents failing in late-stage trials. The only reliable treatment was massive weight loss, which is exceptionally difficult for most patients to achieve and maintain. Enter the GLP-1 receptor agonists. They attack liver disease on multiple fronts. Systemically, they reduce peripheral insulin resistance and decrease the flow of toxic free fatty acids from fat tissue to the liver. Locally, while the expression of GLP-1 receptors on actual liver cells is debated, they are highly active in modulating the inflammatory response of Kupffer cells, the liver's resident macrophages. Clinical results have been astonishing. In landmark phase IIb trials, a daily dose of semaglutide achieved histological resolution of MASH, clearing the inflammation and cell ballooning without worsening liver fibrosis in nearly 60% of patients, compared to just 17% in the placebo group. The introduction of dual agonists has pushed the efficacy even higher. The Synergy-NASH Phase 2 trial evaluated tirzepatide, a dual GIP and GLP-1 receptor agonist. The results demonstrated that up to 73.3% of participants on the highest dose achieved MASH resolution without worsening of fibrosis, while simultaneously showing significant improvements in actual fibrotic scarring. By resolving the lipotoxicity and halting the fibrogenesis pathways, incretin-based therapies are fundamentally altering the trajectory of global hepatology. The kidneys are also showing incredible resilience thanks to these drugs. The kidneys are highly vascularized organs that bear the brunt of chronic metabolic inflammation and hypertension. Diabetic kidney disease is a leading cause of end-stage renal failure worldwide. GLP-1 receptors are expressed heavily in the kidneys, and their activation yields potent nephroprotective effects. These drugs decrease glomerular hyperfiltration, which is the damaging high pressure inside the kidney's delicate filtering units, reduce the secretion of inflammatory cytokines within the renal cortex, and lower oxidative stress in both diabetic and non-diabetic models. Clinically, this translates to profound organ preservation. Landmark trials, such as the FLOW trial, have shown that GLP-1 therapies significantly slow the decline of the estimated glomerular filtration rate and drastically reduce macroalbuminuria, which is protein leaking into the urine, a key marker of kidney damage. By acting as a shield against chronic intrarenal inflammation, these therapies are extending the lifespan of the kidneys and delaying the grim need for dialysis. As the systemic anti-inflammatory profile of GLP-1 therapies comes into sharper focus, researchers are actively exploring their utility in diseases historically managed strictly by heavy immunosuppressants and biologics. This includes dermatological applications. The skin is the body's largest immune organ, and conditions like psoriasis and hidradenitis suppurativa are driven by aberrant inflammatory loops. Emerging data from 2025 and beyond highlights the dermatological benefits of GLP-1 therapies. In skin cells, GLP-1 activation inhibits inflammatory signaling pathways, leading to enhanced barrier function and increased expression of tight junction proteins. Furthermore, they reduce the polarization of Th17 immune cells, the primary culprits driving psoriatic plaques, and inhibit key inflammatory mediators. The theoretical rationale for using these drugs in autoimmune conditions is highly compelling. By decreasing systemic cytokines and modulating immune pathways, these agents may reduce the infiltration of inflammatory cells into target tissues, such as the thyroid gland in Hashimoto's thyroiditis or the synovial fluid in osteoarthritis. Furthermore, because systemic inflammation is a primary driver of biological aging and cellular senescence, often termed inflammaging, the broad-spectrum dampening of the immune system's hyperactive state suggests that GLP-1 therapies may play a massive role in longevity and the prevention of aging-related diseases. Finally, let us discuss the future and the evolution of incretins. The pharmacological success of pure GLP-1 therapies like semaglutide has birthed a new generation of engineered multi-receptor agonists designed to mimic the complex polyhormonal environment of the human gut and metabolism much more closely. First, we have dual agonists like tirzepatide, which agonizes both the GLP-1 and GIP receptors. It has consistently demonstrated superior reductions in body weight, blood sugar, and systemic inflammatory markers compared to GLP-1 alone. The addition of GIP enhances energy expenditure and acts synergistically to clear dangerous lipids from the liver. Next are glucagon coagonists. While glucagon traditionally raises blood sugar, agonizing its receptor in combination with GLP-1 profoundly increases resting metabolic rate, promotes lipolysis or fat breakdown, and dramatically improves liver health. Agents like survodutide and pemvidutide have shown massive success in clearing hepatic fat and resolving MASH. Then we step up to triple agonists. Molecules like retatrutide are demonstrating unparalleled weight loss and metabolic resetting in clinical trials, effectively clearing all fat from the liver and plummeting systemic inflammatory markers to healthy baselines. The absolute bleeding edge of future therapeutics includes quadruple agonists, candidates like NA931 and NA941, which target GLP-1, GIP, glucagon, and the IGF-1, or insulin-like growth factor 1, receptors simultaneously. These multi-receptor modulators aim to address steatosis, severe inflammation, advanced fibrosis, and trigger cellular regeneration, all in a single oral or injectable dose. We are entering a completely new era of disease modification. The narrative of GLP-1 receptor agonists is no longer confined to the simple realms of endocrinology and weight management. It has expanded into a unified theory of cardiometabolic and neuroinflammatory medicine. We are moving away from an era where chronic diseases are treated in silos, taking a statin for the heart, an immunosuppressant for the joints, and an amyloid clearer for the brain, moving instead toward an era of holistic, metabolic, and inflammatory resetting. By leveraging the body's own incretin architecture, GLP-1 receptor agonists address the absolute root cause of systemic decay, which is chronic, low-grade inflammation. As ongoing clinical trials continue to decode the ultimate potential of these molecules in Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, heart failure, and advanced liver fibrosis, one thing is abundantly clear. The discovery of GLP-1 receptor agonists and their subsequent pharmacological optimization stands as a monumental triumph in medical science, offering a profound new mechanism to heal the inflamed human body from the inside out. Thank you for listening to G-Fun Facts Online. Keep exploring the incredible science that is reshaping our world, and stay tuned for more deep dives into the discoveries defining our future.